The October wind howled through the canyon like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter promise of an early winter. Sarah McKenna pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it offered little protection against the cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. Her boots, worn through at the soles, squelched in the mud left by yesterday's rain as she stumbled along the rocky trail that wound between towering pines and ancient boulders. 3 days. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten anything more substantial than pine needles boiled in creek water. The gnawing emptiness in her stomach had become a constant companion, almost as familiar as the grief that still clung to her heart like morning frost. 6 months had passed since the fever took James, leaving her alone in a world that had no use for a penniless widow. The distant mountains loomed purple and forbidding against the darkening sky, their peaks already dusted with snow. Sarah knew she should find shelter soon, but her legs trembled with each step, and dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. She'd left the last settlement 2 days ago, driven out by suspicious glares and whispered accusations. A woman alone was trouble. They said, "Bad luck. Best she move along." Through the gathering dusk, a thin column of smoke caught her eye, rising from somewhere beyond a cluster of juniper trees. Her heart quickened. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant warmth. And where there was fire, there might be food. Sarah approached cautiously, her hunger warring with her fear. As she drew closer, she could make out several hide-covered structures arranged in a rough circle. Her breath caught. A Modoc camp. She'd heard stories in town, fierce warriors who'd fought the army for their ancestral lands, proud people who trusted no whites. She should turn back, find another way. But the aroma that drifted on the wind-roasted meat and something else, something that made her mouth water, held her fast. Through a gap in the brush, she could see the camp more clearly now. Most of the inhabitants seemed to be gathered around a central fire, their voices carrying in the still evening air, speaking in a language she didn't understand. One tipi stood slightly apart from the others, its entrance flap partially open. No light flickered within. Perhaps it was empty. Perhaps desperation drove her forward. Sarah crept closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. She paused at the entrance, listening. Nothing. Holding her breath, she slipped inside. The interior was dim, but her eyes, adjusted to the gathering darkness, could make out various objects, folded blankets, leather bags, weapons hung from the lodge poles, and there, on a flat stone near the cold fire pit, she saw it. A round cake of cornbread, still warm enough to release wisps of steam into the cool air. Her hands shook as she reached for it. Just one piece, just enough to quiet the fierce hunger that threatened to consume her. She broke off a portion, larger than she'd intended, and raised it to her lips. Stealing from those who have little makes you no better than those who drove you here. The deep voice froze her mid-bite. Sarah spun around, the bread falling from her nerveless fingers. A man filled the entrance of the teepee, his broad shoulders blocking out what little light remained. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she could feel his eyes on her, sharp as winter wind. He stepped forward, and the last rays of sunset illuminated his features. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, skin the color of burnished copper. His hair, black as a moonless night, was worn long and loose except for 2 braids that framed his face. He wore a mixture of traditional dress and white man's clothes. Buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt, a beaded vest, a knife hung at his belt. Sarah tried to speak, to explain, to apologize, but no words came. She pressed herself against the hide wall, trembling. She'd heard what happened to whites caught stealing from Indians, the stories the townspeople told with relish, meant to frighten and warn. The warrior studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in her ragged dress, her hollow cheeks, the desperation written plain on her face. When he spoke again, his English was careful but clear. "You are alone." It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, her throat too tight for speech. "No man waits for you. No family searches." Again, she could only nod. He moved closer, and she could see him more clearly now. Younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 winters, with a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. His eyes, she realized with surprise, held no anger. Instead, there was something else, something that looked almost like understanding. "The bread you tried to take," he said, gesturing to where it lay in the dirt, "was for my evening meal, the last of what I have until the hunting party returns." Shame flooded through her. She'd been so consumed by her own need, she hadn't considered that others might be hungry too. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I'll go. I'll leave right now." "To where?" He tilted his head, studying her. "The town that cast you out? The wilderness that will claim you before morning? You shake like a leaf in autumn wind. When did you last eat?" 3 days, she admitted, hating how weak she sounded. Something shifted in his expression. He bent down, picked up the fallen bread, and brushed the dirt from it. Then, to her amazement, he broke it in half and held out a portion to her. "Eat." Sarah stared at the offered food, tears burning her eyes. "But—" "I tried to steal from you. Hunger makes thieves of us all." His voice carried the weight of someone who had known hungry winters. "Eat." With trembling fingers, she took the bread. It was coarse and slightly gritty, but to her, it tasted like heaven. She forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour it whole. The warrior watched her in silence. When she finished, he spoke again, and this time his words sent ice through her veins. "You cannot stay here without consequence. My people have laws. A thief must face justice." He paused, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Unless—" Sarah's heart pounded. "Unless—" "You have 2 choices." His voice was steady, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "Face the council's judgment for your theft. They may be merciful, they may not, or—" He paused again, and in that pause, Sarah felt her fate hanging like a hawk on the wind. "Or," she breathed, "stay here as my wife." "Under our law, a wife cannot steal from her husband. What is mine becomes yours." The words hit her like a physical blow. Wife? To this stranger, this Modoc warrior? Everything in her recoiled at the thought. She was Sarah McKenna, daughter of a schoolteacher, widow of a good Christian man. How could she even consider? But what choice did she have? Face their justice as a white woman who'd stolen from them? She'd heard enough stories to know how that might end, and even if they simply cast her out, where would she go? Winter was coming. She had no money, no family, no home. The warrior waited, patient as stone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the decision. Outside, she could hear voices, laughter, the normal sounds of evening in the camp. Inside the teepee, there was only the sound of her ragged breathing and the distant howl of wind through the canyon. "I need an answer." His voice was not unkind, but there was a finality to it. "You want mercy or stay here as my wife?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the last of her old life slipping away like sand through her fingers. When she opened them again, she found she could barely speak the word that would seal her fate. "I'll stay." The warrior nodded once, as if she'd simply agreed to help with the evening chores. He turned and retrieved a buffalo robe from a pile near the wall, then gestured to a space near the back of the teepee. "You sleep there. Tomorrow, we speak with the elders. Tonight, rest." He moved past her to the entrance, then paused. "My name is John Hawkeye. You will need to know this." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. She sank onto the buffalo robe, pulling it around her shaking shoulders. Outside, night had fully fallen, and with it came the sounds of the wilderness owl calls, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through pine boughs. Sarah McKenna, widow, Christian woman, member of civilized society, was gone. In her place sat a woman who'd chosen survival over dignity, life over death, an uncertain future over no future at all. She pressed her face into the soft fur of the robe and let the tears come. Tears of grief, of shame, of relief, and of fear for what tomorrow would bring. In the darkness of the teepee, surrounded by the strange smells of smoke and leather and wild places, Sarah wept for the woman she had been and wondered who she would need to become. Sleep eluded Sarah that night. Every time she closed her eyes, memories crashed over her like waves against stone. James's laugh, warm and rich as honey. His hands, rough from farm work but gentle when they touched her face. The way he'd looked at her on their wedding day, as if she were the most precious thing in all creation. They'd been poor, but it hadn't mattered. Their small cabin on the edge of Cedar Falls had been filled with dreams. James would expand the farm, maybe raise cattle. Sarah would teach the local children their letters, just as her mother had done. They'd have babies, 3, maybe 4, who would fill their home with laughter and chaos. Then the fever came. It started with the Johnson family downstream. Within 2 weeks, half the settlement was sick. James had been so careful, boiling their water, keeping Sarah away from the sick. But he couldn't stop helping others. That was his way, always the first to lend a hand, to share what little they had. Sarah pressed her fist against her mouth to stifle a sob. She could still see him, burning with fever, his skin like parchment under her touch. "Don't fret, darling," he'd whispered. "I'll be right as rain come morning." But morning brought only silence and a coldness that no amount of quilts could warm. The town had been kind enough at first. Widow McKenna, they'd called her, with pitying looks and offerings of day-old bread. But kindness had its limits, especially when winter stores ran low and suspicious eyes began to follow her everywhere. A young widow with no family, no means of support, surely she'd resort to unseemly things. Better she move along before she tempted good men from their wives. Sarah shifted on the buffalo robe, its unfamiliar scent filling her nostrils. Outside the teepee, she could hear movement, someone tending the fire, soft voices in that liquid language she didn't understand. What had she done? What madness had driven her to accept such a bargain? But she knew the answer. The same instinct that makes a drowning person grasp at any floating branch. Survival, raw and primitive, stronger than pride or propriety. Dawn came slowly, painting the hide walls of the teepee in shades of amber and rose. Sarah had finally dozed, but woke instantly when the entrance flap lifted. John Hawkeye entered, carrying a water skin and something wrapped in leather. "You are awake." He set the items near her and stepped back, maintaining a careful distance. "Eat, drink. Then we go to the elders." The leather bundle contained dried meat and a cake of pemmican. Sarah's stomach clenched with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly, aware of his watchful presence. He'd changed clothes. She noticed. His hair was freshly braided, adorned with beads and feathers. He looked official, somehow formal. "Thank you," she managed between bites. He inclined his head slightly. A man does not let his wife hunger. His wife, the word sent a chill through her. She wasn't his wife, not truly. This was just an arrangement, a deception to save her from punishment. When she finished eating, he gestured toward a bundle near the tipi wall. "Those were my sisters. She walks with the spirits now. You cannot meet the elders in—" He paused, his eyes flickering over her torn, mud-stained dress. "In those clothes." Sarah unwrapped the bundle with trembling hands. Inside was a doe-skin dress, soft as butter, decorated with simple beadwork, leggings, moccasins, a blanket that could serve as a shawl. They smelled of sage and smoke and something indefinable, the scent of a life lived close to the earth. I'll need a moment to—" He was already moving toward the entrance. "I wait outside." Changing felt like shedding her skin. Each piece of her old clothing that fell away took with it some part of who she'd been. The doeskin dress fit well enough, though it felt strange against her skin. The moccasins were heaven after her destroyed boots. When she caught sight of her pale hands against the tanned hide, she almost didn't recognize them as her own. John Hawkeye studied her when she emerged, his expression unreadable. "Come," was all he said. The camp was stirring to life. Women tended fires. Children ran between the tipis. Dogs barked at their play. Everyone stopped what they were doing to stare as John Hawkeye led her through the camp. Sarah kept her eyes down, feeling the weight of their gazes like physical touches. The elders waited in a large teepee near the center of the camp. 5 men, their faces mapped with years and wisdom, sat in a semicircle. The one in the center, his hair white as fresh snow, spoke at length in their language. John Hawkeye responded, his voice respectful but firm. Sarah understood nothing except her own name when it was spoken. The elder's eyes turned to her, dark and assessing. One of them, younger than the others but with an air of authority, addressed her in English. "You stole from one of our people." "Yes." There was no point in denial. The punishment for theft can be severe. Sarah's hands clenched in the folds of the doeskin dress. "I understand. Yet John Hawkeye speaks for you. He says you are his woman now." She forced herself to meet the elder's eyes. "Yes." The white-haired elder spoke again. A long stream of words that seemed to be directed at John Hawkeye. Whatever he said brought a flush to the warrior's cheekbones, though his expression remained stoic. Finally, the English-speaking elder nodded. "It is decided. If you are truly his wife, then no theft occurred. But know this, white woman, if you bring dishonor to him or danger to our people, the consequences will be swift. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Then it is done." The dismissal was clear. John Hawkeye touched her elbow, guiding her from the tipi. Outside, the morning sun had grown warm, but Sarah shivered as if she'd never be warm again. "What did they say?" she asked as they walked back through the camp. "The things I couldn't understand." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Finally," he said. "They questioned my wisdom, asked if I had been bewitched by a pale face, reminded me of the sorrow that comes from trusting whites." "Then why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why did you claim me?" He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the morning light, she could see lines of hardship around his eyes, the weight of losses she couldn't begin to imagine. "My sister died of hunger last winter," he said quietly. "I found her trying to dig roots from frozen ground. Too proud to beg, too weak to hunt. I was away, fighting the army soldiers. When I returned," he paused, his jaw tightening. "I know the look of someone who has chosen death over dishonor. I saw it in your eyes last night." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not your sister." "No, you are not." He resumed walking. "But hunger is hunger. Loss is loss. These things do not care about the color of one's skin." They reached their tipi now, she supposed. He paused at the entrance. "I will not force you," he said quietly. "You share my tipi for protection, for the law. Nothing more, unless—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "Unless someday you choose otherwise, I am not a man who takes what is not offered." Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her knees weak. "Thank you." He nodded once and ducked inside. Sarah followed, still feeling the eyes of the camp on her back. She was safe, for now. Fed, for now. But she was also something else. A white woman in a Modoc camp. Claimed by a warrior she didn't know. Bound by laws she didn't understand. As she settled onto her buffalo robe, trying to find some position that felt natural in these strange clothes, Sarah wondered if she'd traded one form of exile for another. The townspeople had driven her out for being a burden. What would these people do when they realized she was ignorant of their ways, useless at their tasks, a pale-faced reminder of all the wrongs her people had done to theirs? Outside, the camp went about its daily life. Inside the teepee, Sarah McKenna, no, what was she now, sat in the dim light and wondered if she'd saved her life or merely postponed its ending. The first week passed in a blur of mistakes and humiliation. Sarah's soft hands blistered from tending the fire. She burned the corn cakes, undercooked the venison, and once knocked over the water vessel, spilling their entire supply. The other women watched her struggles with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. "White woman knows nothing," she heard one mutter in broken English as Sarah fumbled with the grinding stones. The woman, heavy with child, demonstrated the proper motion with practiced ease. Like baby. Worse than baby. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to watch, to learn. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She mimicked the smooth, circular motion, though her ground corn remained coarse and uneven. John Hawkeye said little about her failures. He ate the burned bread without complaint, drank the bitter tea she managed to brew, and quietly fixed what she broke. His silence was somehow worse than anger would have been. The work was endless. Before dawn, she had to revive the fire from its banked coals. Water must be fetched from the stream, a quarter-mile walk that left her breathless in the thin mountain air. The teepee needed constant tending, adjusting the smoke flaps when the wind shifted, securing the stakes when storms threatened, keeping the interior clean and organized. Then there were John Hawkeye's needs. His hunting gear required careful maintenance. His clothes needed mending. When he returned from hunting or scouting, often late at night, food must be ready. Sarah learned to keep a pot of stew warm by the coals, to have fresh water waiting. The physical labor was exhausting, but it was the isolation that nearly broke her. The children would peek at her, giggling behind their hands when she passed. The men ignored her entirely, as if she were invisible. The women spoke around her, never to her. Their rapid words in Modoc a constant reminder of her outsider status. Only one person showed her any kindness, an elderly woman named Mary Birdsong, who spoke enough English to serve as an occasional interpreter. It was Mary who corrected Sarah's grip on the scraping tool, who showed her which plants could be gathered for tea, who explained through gestures and broken phrases the proper way to bank a fire. "You try," Mary said one morning, watching Sarah's clumsy attempts to sew beads onto leather. "That is good. My daughter. She never try. Say work too hard. Run away to White Town. Never come back." There was a world of sorrow in those simple words. Sarah thought of her own mother, dead these 10 years, and felt a kinship with this woman who had lost a child to the divide between worlds. The autumn days grew shorter, colder. Frost silvered the grass each morning, and the aspens on the mountainsides turned gold as coins. Sarah learned to read the weather in the movement of clouds, the behavior of birds. A ring around the moon meant storms coming. When the camp dogs huddled together, snow would follow. John Hawkeye was often gone during these days, hunting with the other men as they worked to lay in winter stores. The successful hunters were greeted with celebration songs, dances, feasts that lasted late into the night. Sarah watched from the shadows of the teepee. Not unwelcome exactly, but not included either. It was during one of these absences that the first real test came. Sarah was scraping a deer hide, badly, her arms aching from the unfamiliar motion, when 3 women approached. She recognized the one in front, Yellow Basket, whose husband was some sort of leader, second only to the chief. The woman's dislike had been evident from the first day, her dark eyes following Sarah with unconcealed hostility. Yellow Basket spoke rapidly in Modoc, her tone sharp. When Sarah shook her head to indicate she didn't understand, the woman switched to English. "You bring curse here, bad luck, since you come. Hunting is poor, children sick." Sarah's hand stilled on the hide. "I haven't done anything to— You exist, that is enough." Yellow Basket stepped closer, and Sarah could see the genuine fear beneath the anger. "White woman in warrior's teepee, wearing our clothes, eating our food. The spirits are angry." The other women muttered agreement. One of them, barely more than a girl, spit at Sarah's feet. "I'm not trying to curse anyone," Sarah said, hating how her voice shook. "I'm just trying to survive. Survive somewhere else." Yellow Basket hissed. "Leave before you bring soldiers. Leave before more die." After they left, Sarah sat shaking, the hide forgotten in her lap. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps her presence here was a curse, a disruption of the natural order. She thought of the hostile faces, the constant struggle to complete the simplest tasks, the way John Hawkeye looked through her as if she were a ghost haunting his teepee. That night, She made her decision. John Hawkeye was still gone with the hunting party. She would take only what she'd come with. Her old dress, hidden at the bottom of a parfleche bag. She would leave the doeskin clothes. Leave everything he'd given her. It would be theft to take them. But as she reached for her old dress, her hands encountered something else. A small leather pouch, tied with sinew. Inside were strips of dried meat, a handful of nuts, a small cake of pemmican, traveling food, and beneath it, folded small, a piece of paper. Sarah unfolded it with trembling fingers. The writing was crude, the letters carefully formed by someone for whom writing was not natural. If you go, take this, winter comes. Do not die for pride. She stared at the note, tears blurring her vision. He knew, had known she would try to leave, had prepared for it. Not to stop her, but to help her survive the leaving. Sarah sank onto the buffalo robe, the leather pouch clutched in her hands. Outside, wind rattled the Tipi walls, carrying the scent of coming snow. Winter in the mountains would be brutal. She'd seen the early storms, the way snow could fall feet deep in hours, without shelter, without knowledge of the land. She was still sitting there when dawn broke, the travel food in her lap, the choice unmade. The tipi flap lifted, and John Hawkeye entered, frost glittering on his hair. His eyes went immediately to the pouch in her hands. The unfolded note. He said nothing, just began removing his hunting gear with steady, practiced movements. Sarah watched him, this man who had bound her to him with words but never touched her, who fed her but barely spoke to her, who had prepared for her leaving even as he sheltered her. Why? She asked finally. Why prepare food for me to leave? He paused in cleaning his rifle. A caged bird does not sing. A woman who stays from fear alone brings no joy to a teepee. Yellow Basket says I bring bad luck, that the spirits are angry. Yellow Basket lost her son to white soldiers. She sees enemies in every pale face. He resumed his work. The hunting was poor before you came. Children were sick before you came. But fear needs a face, and yours is convenient. Sarah fingered the travel pouch. Maybe I should still go. Maybe? He set the rifle aside, finally looking at her directly. Or maybe you could choose to stay. Not because you must, because you choose. There is a difference. Outside, she could hear the camp-waking dogs barking, children calling, the daily rhythm of life that had become almost familiar. Sarah thought of the hostile faces, the hard work, the constant feeling of not belonging. Then she thought of Mary Birdsong's patient teaching, of this man's quiet kindness, of the travel food prepared by hands that owed her nothing. Slowly, she rose and placed the pouch back where she'd found it. I'll need to fetch water, she said, and the fire needs tending. Something shifted in John Hawkeye's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around his eyes. He nodded once and turned back to his weapons. Sarah picked up the water vessel and stepped out into the cold morning. The women at the nearby fire pit fell silent as she passed, watching. She kept her head high, her steps steady. She was still an outsider, still unwelcome, still lost between worlds, but she was choosing to stay, for now. That was enough. The council meeting came on a gray morning when clouds hung low over the mountains like smoke. Sarah was grinding acorns when Mary Birdsong hurried to her, face creased with worry. Big talk today, the old woman said. About you, Yellow Basket. She makes much noise. Says white woman cannot stay for winter. Sarah's hands stilled on the grinding stone. What will happen? Mary shrugged, but her eyes were troubled. Chiefs decide. John Hawkeye must speak for you. If council says go. She made a gesture toward the mountains. You go. The meeting took place in the large ceremonial teepee. Sarah wasn't permitted inside, but she could hear the voices rising and falling in heated debate. She recognized Yellow Basket's sharp tones, the rumble of elder voices, and occasionally, John Hawkeye's steady cadence. Other women gathered near their teepees, pretending to work while casting glances toward the council lodge. Sarah felt their eyes on her as she tried to continue her tasks, though her hands shook so badly she spilled half the acorn meal. The debate went on for hours. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning clouds. Children played in the dust between the tipis, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the serious voices from the council. Sarah's back ached from tension. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth hurt. Finally, the entrance flap lifted. Men filed out, their faces grave. Yellow Basket emerged looking triumphant, shooting Sarah a look of pure venom. John Hawkeye came last, his expression unreadable. He walked to where Sarah knelt by the grinding stones. "Come," he said quietly. "We go to gather pine nuts. Bring baskets." Sarah's heart sank. This was it. Then, he was taking her away from camp to tell her she must leave. She gathered 2 baskets with numb fingers and followed him into the forest. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, climbing steadily into the hills. The pine forest grew thicker, the air sharp with resin. Finally, John Hawkeye stopped in a grove of piñón pines, their branches heavy with cones. "The council spoke," he said, not looking at her. "Yellow Basket made strong arguments. Said white woman brings danger. When soldiers come looking for stolen women, all suffer. Said spirits speak to her in dreams, warning of death if you stay." Sarah's throat constricted. "And the others?" "Some agreed. Some—" He picked up a fallen cone, examining it. "Chief Running Bear asked if I had proof you were truly my wife, if we lived as man and woman should." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. She knew what he meant. They shared a tipi, but nothing more. He slept on one side, she on the other, with careful space between. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I claimed you to save your life. That you work hard. Learn our ways. That you have not brought soldiers or tried to flee." He looked at her then, his dark eyes serious. "I told them you chose to stay when you could have run." "But that wasn't enough." "No." He began gathering cones, his movements sharp. Yellow Basket demanded proof. Said if we were not true husband and wife, you must leave before the first snow. Sarah's hands trembled as she began filling her basket. "When must I go?" John Hawkeye was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I told them you would not go, that you are my wife in all ways, that any who challenge this challenge me." She nearly dropped her basket. "But we're not, we don't." "No, we don't." His voice was carefully neutral. "But they need not know this. Let them think what they will. Your presence in my teepee is proof enough, if we are careful. You lied for me." He shrugged. "I spoke words that keep you alive through winter. Truth or lie matters less than survival." They worked in silence, filling their baskets with the precious pine nuts that would help sustain the camp through the cold months. Sarah's mind churned. He had risked his standing, his honor, for her. Why? As if reading her thoughts, he said, "You wonder why I protect you?" "Yes." He straightened, gazing out through the trees toward the distant mountains. "Last winter, my sister died. But before that, there was another loss. My wife, Mourning Dove. Soldiers came to our winter camp. She ran with our daughter. They—" His voice caught, just slightly. "They did not run fast enough." Sarah's heart clenched. "I'm sorry. 3 winters have passed. The grief grows quieter, but does not leave." He returned to gathering nuts. "When I saw you in my tipi, starving, desperate, I thought of Mourning Dove, how she might have needed help somewhere. From someone. How I would want someone to show mercy. I'm not her. No, you are nothing like her." A faint smile touched his lips. "She would have hit me with the grinding stone for bringing a white woman to her teepee. She had a warrior's heart and a temper like summer lightning." Despite everything, Sarah found herself almost smiling. "She sounds formidable." She was. The smile faded. "But you have your own strength. Different, but strength still. To survive alone, to choose to stay among people who do not want you. This is not weakness." They filled their baskets as the afternoon sun slanted through the pines. Sarah felt something shift between them. Subtle but real, not attraction, exactly, but understanding. 2 people who had lost everything, trying to find a way forward. As they prepared to return to camp, Sarah touched his arm. "Thank you for speaking for me, for She gestured helplessly. Everything. He looked down at her hand on his arm, and she quickly pulled it back. But he caught it, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. In camp, we must be careful, he said quietly. They will watch for signs we spoke truth. You understand? She nodded, heat rising in her cheeks. What kind of signs? Small things. A wife does not walk behind. But beside, she serves her husband first at meals. But he ensures she eats well. They speak together, share looks. He released her hand. We must give them a story to believe. The walk back to camp felt different. John Hawkeye carried her basket along with his own, and when they reached the edge of the Tipis, he did something he'd never done before. He placed his hand on her back, guiding her through the camp. It was a light touch, barely there, but Sarah saw the women notice, saw Yellow Basket's eyes narrow. At their teepee, as Sarah began sorting the pine nuts, John Hawkeye spoke loud enough for nearby ears to hear. You did well today. Wife, the gathering was good. Wife. The word still sent shivers through her, but she understood the game now. Thank you, husband, she replied, the word foreign on her tongue. That night, as they sat by their fire, the space between them seemed smaller somehow. They were still strangers bound by necessity, but they were also conspirators now, united in a deception that might keep her alive. When Yellow Basket passed their fire, her face sour with suspicion, John Hawkeye did something that made Sarah's breath catch. He reached over and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering just a moment, a husbandly gesture, casual and intimate. Yellow Basket stalked away, and John Hawkeye returned to tending the fire as if nothing had happened. But Sarah's skin tingled where he'd touched her, and she found herself wondering if the deception might become something more dangerous than the truth. Outside, the first winds of winter howled through the canyon. Inside the teepee, two people who had lost everything sat in companionable silence, each lost in thoughts of what had been and what might yet be. The riders came on a frost-sharp morning when ice crystals hung in the air like scattered diamonds. Sarah was returning from the stream, water vessels balanced carefully in her hands. When she heard the horses, her blood turned to ice water in her veins. 5 men, all white, all armed. Their leader, a thick-set man with tobacco-stained beard, spotted her immediately. His eyes traveled over her doe-skin dress, the beaded ornaments in her hair that Mary Birdsong had helped her plait that morning. Well, well, he drawled, spurring his horse closer. What have we here? A white woman playing Indian? Sarah set down the water vessels carefully, her heart hammering. Around her, she could feel the camp coming alert, women pulling children into tipis, men emerging with weapons close at hand. I live here, she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. Live here? Another rider, younger with mean eyes, laughed. Hear that, boys? She lives here, with the savages. The leader dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. What's your name, woman? Sarah. She lifted her chin. Sarah Hawkeye. Hawkeye. He spat tobacco juice near her feet. That's no Christian name. What was it before these heathens got their hands on you? I am here by choice. Choice? The mean-eyed one dismounted too. No decent white woman chooses to bed down with Indians. They must have taken you, forced you. Don't worry, we'll get you out of here. He reached for her arm. Sarah jerked back. Don't touch me. Listen here, you're confused. Maybe been with them so long you forgot what's proper, but we're taking you back to civilization where you belong. I belong here. Her voice rose. With my husband. The words had barely left her mouth when John Hawkeye appeared, moving with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. He positioned himself between Sarah and the men, his rifle held loosely but ready. My wife spoke truth, he said in clear English. She is here by choice. You will leave now. The leader's face darkened. Your wife. You dare put your filthy hands on a white woman. Tom, look at her, one of the other riders said nervously. She's dressed like them, hair done up like them. Maybe she wants to be here. No white woman wants this. Tom snarled. He looked past John Hawkeye to Sarah. Tell the truth now. Did they take you? Force you? We know how these bucks are. No shame in admitting it. Sarah moved to stand beside John Hawkeye, close enough that their shoulders touched. No one forced me. This is my husband. This is my home. Traitor! The mean-eyed one hissed. Indian-loving whore! John Hawkeye's rifle shifted slightly. Around them, Sarah could see other Modoc warriors emerging from cover, weapons ready. The air crackled with tension thick as smoke. Tom seemed to realize the danger. He raised his hands slightly. Now, everyone calm down. We're just trying to help the lady. The lady needs no help, John Hawkeye said evenly. Leave, now. Can't do that, Tom said. See, we got reports of white women being held by hostiles. It's our Christian duty to investigate. Make sure everything's proper. He took a step forward. John Hawkeye's rifle came up. No further. You threatening me, boy. I defend what is mine. The mean-eyed one reached for his gun. Why, you savage? Stop! Sarah's voice cut through the tension. She stepped forward, placing her hand on John Hawkeye's arm. The gesture was deliberate, widely visible. Tom, is it? You want to know if I'm here by choice? If this is proper? She turned to face John Hawkeye, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. They had played at being husband and wife for the camp. Now their lives might depend on making these men believe it. Forgive me, she whispered, then rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. It was meant to be a show, a desperate gesture to prove their connection. But the moment their lips met, something electric shot through her. His free hand came up to cup her face, and for a heartbeat, the armed men, the watching camp, the danger, all of it fell away. When they parted, Sarah's cheeks were flushed, her breathing unsteady. She turned back to the riders, whose expressions ranged from disgust to shock. Does that answer your question? She asked. I am exactly where I choose to be. Tom's face had gone purple. Unnatural. He spat. You're no better than a savage yourself now. When the army comes to clear out these hostiles, remember we tried to save you. He mounted his horse, gesturing sharply to his men. The mean-eyed one looked like he wanted to say more, but the presence of armed warriors kept him silent. They wheeled their horses and rode out, but not before Tom called back. This ain't over. The army's coming, and traitors hang same as Indians. The camp remained tense until the riders were out of sight. Then, gradually, normal life resumed. Women emerged from teepees. Children peeked out from hiding places. But the looks directed at Sarah had changed. Where before there had been suspicion and hostility, now she saw something else. Not quite acceptance, but a grudging respect. John Hawkeye lowered his rifle, his face unreadable. Come, he said quietly. We must speak with the chief. As they walked through camp, Sarah was acutely aware of him beside her, the heat of his body, the memory of his lips on hers. Her skin felt too tight, her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. Chief Running Bear listened gravely as John Hawkeye related what had happened. The old chief's eyes moved between them, wise and knowing. They will return, he said finally. With more men, with soldiers perhaps. We should move the winter camp. John Hawkeye suggested. Higher into the mountains. Perhaps, but first. The chief looked at Sarah. You stood with us against your own people. Why? Sarah met his gaze steadily. They are not my people, not anymore. They cast me out when I needed help. These, she gestured to the camp around them. These people took me in, fed me, protected me. How could I not stand with them? The chief nodded slowly. Yellow Basket was wrong about you. You have proved your heart today. He said something in Modoc to John Hawkeye, who looked uncomfortable. As they left the chief's teepee, Sarah asked, what did he say? John Hawkeye was quiet for a moment. He said a kiss like that does not come from pretense alone. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. I had to make them believe. Yes. He stopped walking, turning to face her. But did I what? Make yourself believe. They stood there in the middle of the camp, the question hanging between them like morning mist. Sarah found she couldn't answer, couldn't even meet his eyes. Because in that moment when she'd kissed him, desperate to save their lives, she'd felt something she hadn't expected, something that terrified her more than Tom's threats or Yellow Basket's hostility. "The water," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I left the water vessels by the stream." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I will get them." As he walked away, Sarah touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of that kiss. She had stood with a Modoc against her own race, had declared herself wife to a man she barely knew. There was no going back now, even if she wanted to. And that was the most frightening realization of all. She wasn't sure she wanted to. The days following the confrontation were filled with a new awareness. Sarah found herself watching John Hawkeye when she thought he wasn't looking. The way he moved with such quiet confidence. How gentle his hands were when working with leather. The way firelight played across his features in the evening. Sometimes she caught him watching her too. Their conversations, once purely functional, began to deepen. It started simply enough. Sarah asking about a word in Modoc. John Hawkeye explaining some custom she'd observed. But gradually, carefully, they began sharing more. "Your husband," John Hawkeye said one evening as Sarah mended a tear in his hunting shirt. "Tell me of him." Sarah's hand stilled on the buckskin. No one here had asked about James before. He was kind, always laughing. He could make jokes even when the harvest was poor or the well ran dry. She smiled at the memory. He wasn't much of a farmer, truth be told, better at dreaming than doing, but he tried so hard. "You loved him." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded. "Yes." "Very much." "This is good," John Hawkeye said quietly. "A heart that has loved truly can love again. A heart that has never loved is like ground that has never known rain." Sarah looked up from her sewing. "Your wife, Mourning Dove. Tell me about her." His face softened in a way she'd never seen before. "She was like her name, gentle to see, but with the fierce heart of a bird protecting its nest. She could shoot better than many warriors. Rode horses like she was born on them." He smiled. "When I first courted her, she made me wait 2 seasons. Said she wanted to be sure I was not just another young man making promises like spring flowers, pretty but quick to fade. She was wise. Yes, and strong. When our daughter came, the birth was difficult. The medicine woman said we might lose them both. But Mourning Dove fought like a warrior. Said she would not leave this world without seeing her child's face." His voice caught. 3 winters she had with little Fawn. 3 winters of joy before. Sarah set aside the sewing and moved closer. Not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence. "Tell me about little Fawn." She had her mother's smile and my stubborn nature. Already she could ride, sitting in front of me on my horse, laughing when we went fast. His eyes were distant, lost in memory. She loved to gather flowers, even in winter. She would find dried seed pods, bits of colored stone, make them into presents for everyone. They sat in silence, sharing the weight of lost loves. Outside, wind sang through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. "I had no children," Sarah said finally. "We tried, but James said it didn't matter, that I was enough. But I saw how he watched other men's children, the longing in his eyes. You blame yourself. Shouldn't I? A woman who cannot give her husband children, a woman who loved her husband truly gave him more than many men ever receive." John Hawkeye's voice was firm. "Do not dishonor his memory by thinking you are not enough." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her since James died. As the days passed, their pretense of marriage became something more real. Not in the physical sense, they still slept on opposite sides of the Tipi, but in the small intimacies of shared life. John Hawkeye began teaching her to speak Modoc properly. Sarah showed him letters, writing his name in the dirt with a stick. "Your language has too many marks," he complained, but she could see he was pleased to learn. They developed rhythms, patterns. Sarah would have tea waiting when he returned from hunting. He would help her with heavy work without being asked. When Yellow Basket or others watched, they played their roles, standing close, sharing meaningful looks. But increasingly, the pretense felt less like acting. One afternoon, Sarah was gathering late berries with Mary Birdsong when the old woman said, "You different now." "Different how?" Mary smiled. "Before, you like rabbit in snare, always looking for escape. Now," she made a gesture Sarah didn't understand. "Now what?" "Now you look at him like woman looks at man, not just for show." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's complicated. Love always complicated," Mary said placidly. "My husband, when we first marry, I think he's stupidest man in whole tribe. Take him 10 years to prove me wrong." She chuckled. "Still not sure some days." That evening, the first snow began to fall. Soft, fat flakes that drifted down like feathers, transforming the camp into something magical. Sarah stood at the Tipi entrance, watching the world turn white. John Hawkeye came to stand beside her. "Beautiful," he said. "Yes." But when Sarah glanced at him, he wasn't looking at the snow. Her breath caught. "Sarah!" His voice was different, uncertain in a way she'd never heard. "What happened when those men came? The kiss?" "I know," she said quickly. "It was necessary to convince them." "Yes, necessary." He was quiet for a moment. "But since then, I find myself thinking, wondering." Sarah's heart was pounding. "Wondering what?" He turned to face her fully. In the soft light of snow and dusk, his eyes were very dark. "If perhaps the spirits knew something we did not when they brought you to my teepee, if perhaps what began as pretense might become." He didn't finish. Couldn't, because Sarah had risen on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Not for show this time, not to convince anyone, just because she wanted to. This kiss was different from the desperate performance for Tom and his men. This was soft, questioning, a conversation without words. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "John," Sarah whispered. "I know we are not truly husband and wife," he said softly. "I know you came to me from necessity, not choice. But Sarah, Shh." She placed her fingers against his lips. "I'm choosing now. Every day I stay, I'm choosing." He caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. "As am I." They stood there as snow fell around them. Two people who had lost everything finding something new in each other. Not a replacement for what was gone. Nothing could ever be that. But something different, something unexpected and precious. That night, as they settled into their separate sleeping places, the space between them seemed charged with new possibility. They were still careful, still respectful of boundaries not yet ready to be crossed, but something fundamental had shifted. "John?" Sarah called softly in the darkness. "Yes? Thank you for everything, for saving me, for protecting me, for helping me remember that I can still feel." She heard him shift in his robes. "Sarah? Yes? You saved yourself." "I only offered a place to do it, and you," he paused, "you have helped me remember too." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the camp in pristine white. Inside the teepee, two wounded hearts began, carefully and tentatively, to heal. The attack came at dawn, 3 weeks after the first snow. Sarah woke to the thunder of hoofbeats and the crack of rifle fire. John Hawkeye was already moving, grabbing his weapons, pushing her toward the back of the teepee. "Stay down," he commanded, then was gone. Outside, chaos erupted. Women screamed, children cried, men shouted war cries. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Sarah crouched in the teepee, her heart hammering, listening to the nightmare unfolding outside. Through a gap in the hide wall, she could see blue uniforms, soldiers, at least 20 of them, riding through the camp, firing at anything that moved. She saw a woman running with a baby fall forward into the snow, red spreading beneath her. Saw an elder trying to protect his grandchildren cut down without mercy. "No," Sarah breathed, horror washing over her. This wasn't supposed to happen. These were people who had taken her in, fed her, given her shelter, Mary Birdsong, who had taught her patience, the children who had finally begun to smile at her, Chief Running Bear, who had accepted her. A soldier burst into the teepee, his face flushed with battle fury. He saw Sarah and stopped, confusion replacing aggression. "Ma'am, you're white." Sarah rose slowly, her mind racing. "Yes, thank God. We're here to rescue you. Come on, quickly now." "Rescue me?" Sarah's voice was ice. "From what?" "From these savages. Ma'am, we got word there was a white woman being held." "I'm not being held." Sarah moved toward the entrance. "These are my people, my family." The soldier grabbed her arm. "You're confused. Maybe been with them too long, but you're safe now." Sarah wrenched free. "Let me go." She burst from the teepee into a scene from hell. Bodies in the snow, tipis burning, soldiers chasing fleeing women and children. And there, near the council lodge, John Hawkeye and several warriors making a desperate stand. A soldier had grabbed a young girl. Sarah recognized her as Yellow Basket's daughter. The child screamed, fighting, as he dragged her toward his horse. "No!" Sarah ran forward, throwing herself at the soldier. "Let her go!" He backhanded her, sending her sprawling. "Crazy woman! Tom was right about you." Tom, of course. He'd made good on his threat. Sarah struggled to her feet, tasting blood. Across the chaos, her eyes met John Hawkeye's. He was fighting desperately, but there were too many soldiers. She saw the moment a rifle butt caught him in the side, saw him stagger. "John!" The scream tore from her throat. A soldier near her raised his rifle, aiming at John Hawkeye. Without thinking, Sarah launched herself at him, spoiling his aim. The shot went wide. "Traitor!" The soldier shoved her aside. "Indian-loving!" His words cut off as an arrow sprouted from his shoulder. He fell, screaming. Sarah looked up to see Yellow Basket, bow in hand, already knocking another arrow. Their eyes met across the battlefield. For a heartbeat. Sarah saw surprise, then something like respect. Yellow Basket nodded once, then turned to defend her daughter. Sarah scrambled toward John Hawkeye, dodging horses and gunfire. She had almost reached him when pain exploded through her side. She looked down, confused by the spreading warmth. Red bloomed across the doeskin dress. "Sarah!" John Hawkeye's voice seemed to come from very far away. She fell to her knees in the snow. How strange, she thought distantly. It didn't hurt as much as she'd expected. Just cold, so cold. Strong arms caught her before she could fall further. John Hawkeye's face swam into view, etched with fear and fury. "No," he said fiercely. "No, you will not leave. Do you hear me? You will not leave." Sarah tried to speak, but only blood came. Around them, the battle was turning. More warriors had arrived from hunting parties, catching the soldiers in crossfire. She could hear orders to retreat, the thunder of horses leaving. "Stay with me," John Hawkeye commanded, pressing his hand against her wound. "Sarah, stay with me." She wanted to, oh, how she wanted to, but darkness was creeping in from the edges of her vision. She raised a trembling hand to his face, trying to memorize the feel of him. "John," she managed to whisper. "Not your fault. No talking. Save your strength." Other hands were there now. Mary Birdsong, her weathered face grim. The medicine man, already moving with urgent purpose. Sarah was lifted, carried. She had a confused impression of the interior of a teepee, of heated stones and bitter tea forced between her lips. Pain came then, wave after wave as they worked on her wound. She must have screamed, because John Hawkeye's hand found hers, grounding her. "Fight," he said fiercely. "You fought for us. Now fight for yourself. Fight for me." Sarah wanted to tell him she was trying, but the words wouldn't come. She was so tired. It would be easy to let go, to drift away from the pain. James was waiting. Wasn't he? James and little Morning Dove and all the others taken too soon. But John Hawkeye's voice anchored her. He spoke in Modoc now, words she didn't understand but whose meaning she felt. Pleas, promises, threats against the spirits if they took her. His hand never left hers. Time became fluid. Sometimes she was burning with fever, throwing off blankets while voices argued around her. Sometimes she was freezing, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She dreamed of snow stained red, of children's screams, of Tom's satisfied smile. Once, she surfaced enough to find John Hawkeye still beside her, haggard and unshaven. "The others?" she whispered. We drove them off, but we lost." His voice broke. "We lost many. The little girl, Yellow Basket's daughter, safe because of you." Sarah closed her eyes. At least there was that. At least one child saved from whatever fate the soldiers had planned. "Sleep," John Hawkeye said softly. "I will be here." And he was. Every time she woke, he was there, spooning broth between her lips, changing bandages with gentle hands, talking to her in a mix of English and Modoc, stories of his childhood, plans for spring, anything to keep her tethered to life. Slowly, painfully, she began to heal. The fever broke. The wound, though deep, had missed anything vital. She was weak as a newborn fawn, but she was alive. The first time she managed to sit up on her own. John Hawkeye's face lit with a joy that took her breath away. "I thought I lost you," he said simply. "I thought the spirits had taken my heart twice." Sarah reached out, touched his face. He hadn't shaved in days, and the stubble was rough under her palm. "I couldn't leave," she said. "Not when I just found you." He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. "When you are well," he said, "we will speak of the future, but know this, you are no longer here from necessity or obligation. You are here because this is where you belong. With me, with our people. Our people." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She thought of the woman who had stumbled into this camp months ago. Starving and desperate, that woman was gone. In her place was someone new, still Sarah, but changed, stronger, part of something larger than herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Our people." Outside the medicine Tipi, she could hear the sounds of the camp rebuilding. There would be mourning songs tonight. She knew. Scaffolds built for the dead. Grief and anger and the hard work of surviving. But they would survive. They would endure. And she would be part of it, no longer a stranger looking in but a member of the tribe in all but blood. She had been willing to die for them. Now, she would live for them, and for the man who held her hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. The winter passed slowly, marked by the rhythm of healing. Sarah's wound mended, leaving a puckered scar on her side that ached when storms approached. But it was the invisible wounds, the memories of violence, the faces of those lost, that proved harder to heal. John Hawkeye rarely left her side during those first weeks. He was patient beyond measure, helping her regain strength with the same steady care he might give to mending a broken bow when nightmares woke her, thrashing and crying out. He would light sage and speak soft words until the demons retreated. By the time spring's first green shoots pushed through melting snow, Sarah could walk the length of the camp without exhaustion. The other members of the tribe treated her differently now. Where once there had been suspicion and hostility, she found acceptance. She had bled for them, stood with them against her own kind. That blood had washed away the last barriers between them. Yellow Basket came one morning when John Hawkeye was out checking trap lines. Sarah was scraping a hide when the woman's shadow fell across her work. "Your hands," Yellow Basket said. "Show me." Confused, Sarah held out her hands. They were no longer the soft hands of a town woman. Calluses ridged her palms. Her nails were short and practical. Small scars marked where knives had slipped or thorns had caught. Yellow Basket nodded. "Workers' hands now. Good." She sat without invitation. Something she'd never done before. "My daughter lives because of you." Any mother would have done the same. Sarah said carefully. "No, not any white woman would risk her life for Modoc child." Yellow Basket was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about you. My hate made me blind. I saw only white skin, not the heart beneath. You had reasons for your hate. Yes, but hate is like winter ice. It preserves nothing, only makes all things cold and dead. She reached into her pouch, pulled out something wrapped in soft leather. This is for you. Sarah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a necklace of beads and elk teeth, beautifully crafted. At its center hung a small silver medallion. Was my mother's? Yellow Basket said, given by her mother, for woman of courage, woman of family. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. I can't accept this. You're family now, not by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice. Yellow Basket rose. John Hawkeye is good man. He mourned long time. Good to see light in his eyes again. After she left, Sarah sat holding the necklace, overwhelmed by the gift and what it represented. When John Hawkeye returned, he found her still cradling it. Yellow Basket came, she said unnecessarily. He smiled, setting down the rabbits he'd caught. I see, and the sky did not fall, despite everything. Sarah laughed. No, though I thought it might. That evening, as they shared the rabbit stew she'd prepared, John Hawkeye seemed unusually quiet. Sarah had learned to read his silences. This one held the weight of words unspoken. What troubles you? She asked. He set down his bowl, gazed into the fire. The elders speak of moving the camp, further into the mountains, away from soldier routes. It will be hard travel, dangerous. I'm strong enough now. I know. He looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. But I wonder, is this the life you want? Always running, always fearing the next attack? Sarah set down her own bowl, moved to sit beside him. What life would I have elsewhere? In towns where they call me traitor? Where they see my choice to stand with you as betrayal of my race? You could go east, start fresh where no one knows. John? She stopped his words with a touch. Do you want me to go? No! The word burst from him with surprising force. No, Sarah, I want... He took a breath, started again. When you lay dying, when I thought the spirits would take you, I made promises. Foolish promises, perhaps, that if you lived, I would ask nothing more, would be content with whatever you chose to give. And if I choose to give everything, his eyes searched hers. Do not say this from gratitude or obligation. I say it from love. The words hung between them. Simple and true. I love you, John Hawkeye. Not the love I had for James. That was spring rain, gentle and sweet. This is different. This is lightning and thunder, earth and sky. This is choosing to build something new from the ashes of what we've lost. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. My Sarah, my brave one. I loved Morning Dove with a young man's heart, all fire and foolishness. But you, his voice roughened. You I love with a man's heart, scarred but stronger for the breaking. You I love with eyes open to all the hardship ahead. They came together then, not in the desperate kiss of performance or the gentle exploration of new feeling, but with the certainty of two people who had faced death and chosen life, chosen each other, later, as they lay entwined in the buffalo robes that had once divided the Tipi. Sarah traced the scars on his chest, marks of battles survived, losses endured. No more sleeping on opposite sides? She murmured against his skin. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. No more pretending what is already true. And what is true? He tilted her chin up, looked into her eyes. That you are my wife in all ways. That I am your husband. That whatever comes, soldiers, hardship, another hungry winter, we face it together. Sarah thought of the woman who had stumbled into this camp months ago. Starving and alone, ready to die. That woman could never have imagined this, lying in the arms of a Modoc warrior, accepted by his people, bearing the scars of standing with them against her own kind. But that woman had been transformed by loss and necessity, by kindness and cruelty, by choices made in desperate moments that led to unexpected grace. Together, she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Outside, spring wind sang through new leaves, carrying the promise of renewal. The camp would move soon, deeper into the mountains, further from the reach of those who would destroy them. It would be hard, dangerous, uncertain, but Sarah would face it not as a refugee or outsider, but as a full member of the tribe, as a woman who had chosen her place and people, as a wife who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances. In the morning, she would rise and take up the daily work of survival. She would help prepare for the move, would walk beside John Hawkeye into whatever future awaited them. There would be hardships and probably more losses. The world was not kind to those who crossed the boundaries it tried to enforce. But tonight, in the circle of her husband's arms, in this teepee that had become home, Sarah McKenna Hawkeye was exactly where she belonged. She had traveled far from the frightened woman who'd stolen bread in desperation. That choice, made in the extremity of hunger and hopelessness, had led her to this, to love, to belonging, to a life she could never have imagined, but now couldn't imagine living without. "Are you happy?" John Hawkeye asked softly in the darkness. Sarah considered the question. Happy seemed too simple a word for what she felt. She was scarred, changed, forever marked by loss and violence. But she was also loved, accepted, part of something larger than herself. "I am home," she said at last, and that, she knew, was answer enough. In the distance, a wolf howled, not a threat but a greeting, one survivor calling to another across the vast darkness. Sarah smiled, pressed closer to John's warmth, and let sleep claim her. She had come seeking bread and found a banquet of belonging. She had offered desperation and received love. And in the end, that was the greatest miracle of all, that two broken hearts could come together and create something whole, something worth fighting for, something worth living for. The story of the woman who'd stolen bread from a warrior's teepee would be told around Modoc fires for generations. But it would not be a cautionary tale. It would be a love story, a survival story, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, and the courage to build bridges where others saw only walls. And it had all begun with a single moment of desperate choice, when a starving woman had been offered two options. "You want mercy, or stay here as my wife?" She had chosen to stay, and in staying had found not just survival, but a life worth living and a love worth dying for. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening while driving, relaxing at home, or perhaps during your daily walk? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what touched your heart in Sarah and John Hawkeye's journey.